Alright, so today we're going to be talking about singing bones and murder ballads, because that's chill. No, we're gonna do that. Okay, also I've never played this on PS4 before, which is... oh god. Okay. What are my controls? How do I just want you. Ha 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 ha! Okay. Alrighty, friends. So. Let's see, how do I... there we go. This may not work properly. We'll see. Okay. So. Everyone pretty much knows at least one murder ballad. Even if you aren't particularly interested in murder ballads, even if you're like, what the heck is a murder ballad? You've probably heard one. If you've heard Carrie Underwood's Two Black Cadillacs, if you've heard Garth Brooks' Thunder Rolls, which I cannot go into detail on that one because he is a little wild when it comes to the copyright, but if you look up Thunder Rolls by Garth Brooks and you look up the extra their extra lyrics that he doesn't really use, you realize that yes, that is a murder ballad, and yeah, the lady does straight up kill her cheating husband, which is not something that is unique to just Southern classic country. This is something that has been going on since possibly the 1400s. Now, murder ballads really did start kicking off in the 1400s. They actually were printed out on these small pieces of paper and handed out to people on the street because people just were wild for this. Because again, you know, murder, violence, death, true love that's ended too soon, those kind of things are kind of like on your mind at all times. It's why that era of country music in the US is so popular. So back in the 1400s, one of the original, I guess you would say, murder ballads is also a ballad about singing bones. Now, it's argued that the first more popular singing bones ballad was started in Scandinavia, I believe. Scandinavia, Norway, that area. It's most popularly known as the Twa Sisters, originally spelled Twa, T-W-A. And the story of the Twa Sisters is usually that there are these two sisters. I know, big shock. And these sisters, one of them is super hot and super fly. The other one is not so super hot and fly. And she doesn't really like that, and she's the older one too, because as you know, in folklore and fantasy, fairy tales of this time, if you are an older sibling, you're pretty much screwed no matter what happens. You have to be younger, you have to have blonde hair for reasons that are unknown but can be guessed, and you have to be innocent and know nothing of the world in order to survive it. Which is a little surprising. But regardless, we've got the hot sister and the not hot sister. Well, they're all hanging out, having a good time, and the hot sister's like, oh my gosh, this king really wants, or prince really wants to marry me. Isn't this great? And the older sister's like, yeah, sure, alright, yeah, that's really awesome. Hey, I have a great idea. Why don't you and I go and we hang out by this convenient bridge? And the younger sister's like, oh yes, my sister who I love so dearly, let's hang out by this convenient bridge. So they go to the convenient bridge, and the older sister pushes the younger sister off the bridge or kills her with a rock, and the younger sister dies. And the older sister's like, well, great, that's awesome. Now I'm gonna marry the prince. Bye! So she leaves. Younger sister's dead. It's very sad. Well, it gets weirder, and here's where the content warnings come in. So watch out for some body horror here. This shepherd comes by, And because he's an ordinary shepherd, he sees this body floating under the bridge, and he goes, I need to turn that into an instrument. Because why wouldn't you? So he turns this poor girl's body into a harp. Her breastbone is the body of the harp, and her golden hair are the strings. And he decides, yes, this is a natural thing for me to do, and he starts playing it. And she's like, oh dude, my creepy friend who just did this horrible thing to me, I'm not gonna curse you at all, even though I definitely should. No, my sister, she killed me for a hot dude, and now she and the hot dude are getting married, and I'm so sad because I'm now a singing harp, thanks for that. And the shepherd's like, wow, that is amazing. I am going to bring this to the king and show him off this cool, not at all haunted harp. So he goes to the king, and he's like, oh, I'm exhausted. So he goes to the king, and he's like, hey, check out this haunted harp that I have. Isn't this cool? And not at all relevant to this not so hot wife that you have. And the king's like, oh yeah, play this totally not creepy, disturbing harp. So he plays it. And of course, the younger sister woefully tells her tale. And the older sister either mysteriously dies, or she gets boiled in lead. It's one of those things where, you know, when the older sister or the mean stepmother is found out, inevitably something absolutely horrible happens to them in return, because, you know, we can't have a folk tale or fairy tale without some horrid violence. But regardless, all this goes down, and everyone listening to this just freaking loves this. Like, they go to town on the Two Sisters story. Like, everyone is into the Two Sisters. They're all listening to it. They're all making songs about it. Over 500 versions of this ballad have been told over the years. So there's something about the concept of a gruesome murder and then the bones of the dead speaking after the murder has taken place that really strikes the interest in people. And this isn't just the people in the 1400s to the 1800s. This is also now. If anyone has seen any songs by Lorena McKennitt, she has sung a version of the Two Sisters. It would be the more Celtic version, where there are swans there all of a sudden, because folklore in that area really likes swans. Oh, let me talk to my friend here. So, that version just has some swans floating about for some reason. Not really clear on why, but hey, if you like swans, you should listen to Lorena's version of this. It's pretty cool, and her voice is definitely ethereal, so go for it. But that is one of the oldest stories of a murder ballad that includes the introduction of singing bones. Now, aside from that, shortly, or a few centuries after that started gaining popularity, the Brothers Grimm showed up. And they were like, oh wow, we have discovered this whole new thing that definitely didn't involve women before, but involves men. And it is called the singing bone. Aren't we original and unique? And everyone's like, yeah, gosh, Brothers Grimm, you're so original and unique. And they told the story of the singing bone. Now, the singing bone from the Grimm brothers is kind of like a mix of, not Menelaus, Meleager? Yeah, the story of Meleager, a Greek hero. They kind of merged that with the Two Sisters story. And in the Brothers Grimm version, the whole idea of that is that there's this boar, just like with Meleager, that is just going clown town on the country. And the boar, oh, did I water my crops? Oh, who knows. Well, the boar's going to clown town, and the king's like, look, my stuff is all wrecked, can somebody please help me? And these two farmers, or two knights, depending on who you're reading the story from, go, oh, yeah, no, we can do this, totally. And one of the knights or farmers, the older one, we'll call them farmers for now because we're playing Stardew, he is older. And if anyone can guess what happens when you're older, he is also not as hot. And he is a jerk, and he is not innocent. And so obviously you know that he is going to meet a sticky end. But regardless, he and his much hotter, much sweeter, more innocent brother decide that they're going to kill this boar. And they go off to do so. Well, when they do, the king's like, hey look, so this boar is kind of taking up a huge amount of space, so you should split up because that's safe. And the brothers are like, yeah, sure. So the older one goes to the west, the younger one goes to the east, and when the younger one goes to the east, he runs into a dwarf who has a spear, and he's like, hey, so I can tell by the fact that you are a younger brother and that you're hot, that you are probably of pure and innocent soul. So you need to take this spear, and if you do, you'll be able to kill the boar. And the younger brother's like, oh, sweet, I trust you, random man I met in the woods. So he gets the spear and he holds it out in front of the boar, and the boar just kind of drives itself on the spear because it's like, oh my god, I'm so sorry, you're just so hot, I can't handle this. And so the boar dies. And the younger brother's like, oh, sweet, okay. Because the king, in his great mercy, decided that anyone who killed the boar would marry his daughter, because that's true love. So the prince grabs the boar and starts dragging the boar through the woods, and he runs into the party cabin. So in the middle of the woods, there's a party cabin. Everyone is hanging out, they're all getting drunk. In the middle of the woods, while a wild boar is supposedly rampaging through the town, a little bit of a Mask of the Red Death going on there. And sure enough, the older brother is there because he needs to drink to gain his courage, according to him. So the older brother sees that the younger brother has the boar and is like, oh no, that's unacceptable, I must be hideous. So he says, hey, younger brother, you should totally hang out with us and get so drunk. Like, we've got a kegger and everything, it's gonna be great. And the younger brother's like, yes, older brother, who I love so much, I definitely trust you and will do what you say. So they go and they get drunk and they have a party and they have a real good time. And the older brother takes the younger brother to a bridge. Familiar? And he's like, hey, look over this bridge for me real quick. And the younger brother's like, yeah, that makes sense. And of course, the younger brother gets killed, falls off the bridge, the older brother buries him there, runs off, marries the princess. So, just like with the Two Sisters, someone shows up and they see this dead body, and they actually see a bone from the dead body. It's usually like a femur or, you know, like a bigger bone sort of. And of course the shepherd's like, hell yeah, I'm gonna make this bone into a horn because that's normal. And he creates a horn out of this man's bones and he starts to play. And the younger brother, who is now haunting this bone, starts singing about, you know, you're blowing this horn that is like of my body, so good job with that. And oh, I don't know how to do this. And he's like, yeah, so my brother straight up shanked me, that's kind of a problem, can you do something about it? And the shepherd's like, just like the last one, is like, hey, I should probably bring this information up to the king. Not because, hey look, somebody's been murdered and their ghost is singing to me through this horn, but because I have this wicked-ass horn that I think they would be really interested in. So he brings the horn to the king and he starts playing it, and of course, uh-oh. How do I do this? Ah! And of course the king's just like, oh shoot, yeah, no, that actually happened. And the older brother probably dies a gruesome death. I think he's drowned? Yeah, he's drowned as a punishment for his horrible, horrible crime. And my cats are fighting. If you hear anything in the background, one of them decided to climb onto the top of the cat tree, and just like the two brothers or the two sisters, one of them had to go down and is now sulking. But that story is kind of a mix between the two sisters and the story of Meleager and the Caledonian War. Let me make sure that I can still hear myself on here. Hello. Hello. Okay, good. I can hear myself. Alright, and thank you to the one person who's still watching this, oh god. So, Meleager and the Caledonian War is... I know you're sad that you got taken off of the top spot, my friend, but there's nothing we can do about that. Sorry, I have to talk to my cats, they're sad. So, the thing with Meleager and the Caledonian War is that, hey Pam, so the thing about the Caledonian War is that Meleager doesn't have a brother in this one. He doesn't have a sister. There's no people who get murdered on bridges and their bones start to sing. But the similarity between the Caledonian Boar myth and the Singing Bone by the Brothers Grimm mostly involves the boar situation and the king who really needs his boar to be gone. Now, Meleager, some of you may know, I might be mispronouncing his name atrociously, and I do apologize for that. Meleager is one of the Argonauts. If you've ever heard of Jason and the Argonauts, he's one of those dudes. So, when Meleager was born, his mom was told by the fates that, hey, you see this piece of wood in the fire right there? As soon as that wood burns out, this kiddo is dead, so, just to let you know. And the mom is horrified, so she takes the wood and she runs off and hides it so that her son may not die. Well, fast forward a few years, Meleager's father, who is either Ares or a man named Dad, his dad, Dad, is doing this festival, and he's talking about how great all these gods are, and he's like, oh yes, my favorite gods, we've got Ares and Hermes and the other ones, and yeah, I just love gods are so great. And all of the gods are like, hell yeah, chill, that's awesome, yeah, like we're all up for this, except for Lady Artemis, because Artemis, the goddess of the hunt, is completely ignored during this time. And she's like, oh no, that's unacceptable, because if you're doing anything and you ignore one god, that one god is going to ruin your life. So just like in the story of the Singing Bone, the goddess Artemis decides to bring down a really mean-ass boar, and this boar, again, is going to clown town on everybody, just destroying everything. He's ruining everybody's time. He shows up at the party late, and, like, he's always, incredibly rude to everyone. It's just not a chill-ass time. So, Meleager's dad is like, oh my god, how could you do that to me, you horrible bird? Okay, so Meleager's dad... Moment of silence, please, for my plant that just died. Okay, so he's like, hey, I'm gonna give you some great shit if you kill this boar. And Meleager's like, yeah, no, I'm cool with that. So he joins along with a bunch of hunters in killing this boar. And who should show up but the hottest of the hotties, Atalanta. And Atalanta is one of the best huntresses or hunters in pretty much all of Greek myth, and she's so fly, and she's so cool, and like she kills this boar and she just kind of like makes a pose, and Meleager's like, oh my god, I am so deeply in love with her, suddenly I respect women. And she's like, yeah, that happens sometimes with me, most of the time it's the opposite, but cool. So Meleager and her decide that they're going to join forces to kill this boar. And of course Atalanta gets the first hit in, because she's amazing. And while Meleager kills the boar, he's like, well, Atalanta, since you hit the boar first, and because I'm just so in love with you, you're so cool, and she flips her hair like, yeah, totally, I'll give you the pelt of the boar. And she's like, weird flex, but okay. So he gives her the pelt, and his uncles are like, oh, no, hold on, sexism, guys, like, sexism, we can't do that, you're not supposed to give a pelt to a woman, what is your problem? And of course, being a rational person and hero in Greek myth, Meleager goes, well, that's unacceptable, and then he kills his uncles. Because again, that's rational, that makes sense. You kill your uncles when they insult you, right? Yeah, totally. So he kills his uncles. And then his brothers, a few of his brothers are just like, hey, hold on, that's unacceptable. Like, you just straight up killed our our uncles over this girl that we barely know. Let's insult her. And they, of course, insult Atalanta, and Meleager, who's like, no, guys, I had one sip of respect women juice, and, so I'm gonna just, destroy everything. So, of course, he kills his brothers. So just like with the Two Sisters, or with the Singing Bones, you kill your brothers, and something bad's gonna have to happen to you. So his mom, who's just like, okay, there's so much drama happening right now, and it's all you, my son, decides that she's going to make it worse. So she goes off and finds the stick that should not be burned, or else her son will die, and she just straight up throws that in the fire. So of course, someone who murders their siblings and uncle, just like in the story of the Two Sisters, meets a sticky end. This is very typical of Greek myth. It is not unfamiliar. In fact, he is even the one who tells Heracles to marry his sister. Heracles is in the underworld at some point, and he's just like, hey, Heracles, I've got this hot sister, and I feel really bad that, like, I died before I could help her find a hot dude. Do you want to marry her? And Heracles is like, sure, this will never backfire, and I will never horribly murder her at any point in my life. So, again, the cycle just continues. So, murder ballads, in a way, you could say that they got their start in ancient myth. Not just with the stories of Meleager and Heracles and everyone, oh, for the love of Pete, and everyone else who kills their siblings or parents in a fit of confusion or rage. But even all the way down to, say, the ancient Mesopotamian myth, where Gilgamesh and Enkidu also kill a giant boar, which was also brought about because somebody insulted a goddess, and one of them does meet a horrible end as a result. Now, if you know me, or have known me for any amount of time in my life, you know that I am absolutely in love with the Enkidu and Gilgamesh story, despite all of the horrible things that happen there. It is no surprise. But, part of that is actually because of my own very dramatic and kind of wild childhood. At one point, I was actually rescued by a woman who was named after Ishtar, the goddess of fertility and sometimes war in Mesopotamia. And just like her, if you insulted her or someone she loved, she became very intense about it. So as a result, I always kind of loved Mesopotamian myth. And as many people know, Ishtar, Easter, yes, there is a connection there. But yes, those are some of the oldest murder ballads. The more common popular murder ballads that you would see nowadays are, of course, you know, the Garth Brooks, Thunder Rolls. We have the, pretty much any classic country song is going to involve somebody who has been done wrong, and they murder their horrible, horrible boyfriend or girlfriend, and they show up in all black, very sophisticated during the funeral, smoking a cigarette and being like, ha 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 ha. So that's pretty typical, but one of the older, newer ones, I guess you would say, comes from a, well, it comes from an older ballad. I think it's called the Gosford tragedy, or the, it's something to do with the captain. But, basically, it turned into a story called Pretty Polly, and it became very popular in Kentucky in the early 1900s, and someone eventually made a song about it in the 1920s, and another person made a song about it in the 1960s, and it's just become this kind of a common song. And the thing with Pretty Polly is, instead of somebody murdering the person they love in a crime of passion, and then regretting it later and being murdered, this person always wanted to murder Polly. And poor Polly, she had a horrible boyfriend, and he had already dug the grave by the time he brought her to it. So the story of Pretty Polly is very much a murder ballad where the murder was premeditated, and it was a great tragedy. And quite often, the murderer does not have a horrible end. In the Kentucky versions, he's usually attacked by a mob later, because mob justice. And again, this is very, like, old school, kind of western, southern folklore going on now. Now, another murder ballad that's very popular, and I think this will be the last murder ballad I talk about, is called The Cruel Brother. Now, The Cruel Brother is another really popular one, around the same time, I think, as the Two Sisters became very popular. And just like with the Brothers Grimm and the Singing Bone, this mostly gained traction after it was collected by Child, who is one of the primary, I guess you could say, like, archivists or collectors of folklore and balladry, way back when. Now, the story of the Cruel Brother is wild and makes no sense. So, at least in the context of now. So there's this lady, and oh, she's attractive, and oh, she's pretty, and oh, she's just so nice. And this knight wants to marry her, because he sees her among her two sisters, and one of the sisters is okay, and the other one's not so great, but she, oh goodness, she is just so beautiful and so sweet and innocent, you know. So again, innocence gets you killed in this. You gotta be clever, but not too clever. So he sees her, and he's like, oh wow, I've gotta marry you right now because of reasons. And she's like, yeah, reasons work for me. So the two of them are going to get married, and she tells him, well, in order to do that, you need to get permission from everyone I'm related to. Like, absolutely everybody. It has to be this bonkers thing. Because I'm a woman, and, you know, you have to just ask literally everyone I know. So he goes around, and she asks him, hey, did you tell my mom? Did you tell my dad? Did you tell my fair sisters? And he goes, yes, I did. And, you know, he got consent from her parents dear, and likewise from her sisters fair, and he got consent from her ken each one, but forgot to speak to her brother John. And her brother John, just like Lady Artemis, is furious that he has not been recognized in this way, and he bides his time, and by the end of the poem, everyone gives these beautiful gifts to the sweet lady, and she's being put up on her horse, and her brother John set her on her horse. She leaned over the saddle bow and gave him a kiss ere she did go. And he had taken a knife, both long and sharp, and stabbed that bonny bride to the heart. And as they're going through the streets, no one notices that she has been straight up shanked by her brother. And it isn't until like halfway through town that she's like, hey, my love, my sweet man who I just married, I might be like bleeding everywhere. And the sweet man who she married, of course, is horrified, and he goes, oh, we'll take you to a hill to die. I'm so sorry, my love, that I just didn't pay the basic amount of attention to you to realize that you were dying tragically. And he says, oh, my sweet love, you know, what should you give to your family when you die? You know, like, you have a will. And she goes, oh, well, you know, what will you leave to your mother dear? My velvet pall and my silken gear. What will you leave to your sister Anne? My silken scarf and my golden fan. What will you give to your sister Grace? My bloody clothes to wash and dress. Which is horrifying. I'm so sorry, Grace. That is the worst gift you could have received. And then they says, what will you leave to your brother John? The gallows tree to hang him on. So John might have it a little bit worse than Grace, but Grace is the one who's going to have to wash her dress. So something might have been going on there with Grace and the pretty lady. But basically the lady is buried, everyone cries. Oh, how could we have not known that this would happen? If only I had paid attention to her wishes and asked literally everyone to marry her. And of course, you know, the brothers ridden out of town are killed tragically, depending on which version of the story you read. So there are many themes when it comes to murder ballads. Usually it's going to be that the person who is killed is innocent and pure and good, and just, oh gosh darn, they had no clue that this was going to happen to them whatsoever, because they're just so innocent in the ways of the world. And it's usually an older sibling who kills them. It's usually an older sibling who gets their horrible comeuppance. And usually they fall in love with a nameless stranger who then kind of just like mourns them forever. You know, which, alright, cool. And in some versions of this, not only is there a nameless stranger who mourns them forever, but there are also bones that tell their stories. I've always found that very interesting, that there's this whole subgenre of folktales and folklore that involve the idea of bones telling the story of a person's life and death after they've already died, and that their need for vengeance or justice carries on afterwards. It's very unusual and dark and macabre, of course, but it's still very fascinating, and I think part of that fascination is why murder ballads have continued to be a staple of any kind of folklorish genre, even to this day. You don't see it as often in southern country music in the US anymore, like it used to be. And part of that, you know, I could go on for quite a long time about how country music these days just isn't as good as when it was all about murder and stories. But, you know, okay, let's be honest. It's not as good without the murder and the stories. If you're singing that's just, you know, about like, oh man, I have this truck and it's so great, and this girl that I love who's so great, but, you know, I don't know her name. All I know is that she wears these short shorts, and, you know, she's a good old country girl, but not too good old country girl to, you know, get on the back of my truck and look so hot. You know, it doesn't have the same allure as this woman was, you know, done wrong by this horrible man, so therefore she puts poison in his drink, and she throws him into the lake, and to this day you can see her standing by the lake looking over it. Or, you know, oh gosh, Earl Had to Die. Classic modern classic is Earl Had to Die. Earl's horrible, the ladies kill him, they're triumphant about it, and in the end they don't get their comeuppance because he was a bad person. And sometimes when, you know, that happens in a murder ballad, the murderers get off scot-free, which is something I find that's almost unique to country music in that era. But again, that's not a thing anymore, really. It's not as common in any case. But yeah, if you are a fan of this kind of thing, definitely look into the Lorena McKennett songs. She sings multiple ballads that would fit into this genre. The Twa Sisters has over 530 versions out there today. So if you ever just want to read a whole bunch of poetry about these two sisters, one killing the other and the other one having a heart made of her bones, I mean, strange that you would want to read 500, but there are stranger things in this world, so go for it, friends. Live your dream of reading 500 poems at once. Lord knows I've probably done something like that. Oh yeah. Yeah, there's a certain phase that you go through, Flowers, where you get very into Lorena McKennett. Someone on the chat just said, you know, oh yeah, my ex loved her. The pagan phase. Yep, it's the pagan phase. You get really into Lorena McKennett. You sing, like, you get a little bit into Enya. Not too much into Enya, but you get a little bit into Enya. And then you get really into folklore. And that's a thing. But yeah, this was the a relatively brief stream. I hope you don't mind, just because while I could go on and on about murder ballads, and you could honestly go on for hours just about the Twa Sisters alone, I do have other things I will need to do, so I will have to cut this one short. But hopefully y'all enjoyed hearing about people murdering each other in strange ways, and then their bones being haunted and telling their horrid, torrid tales to all who would hear. If this is something that's interesting, let me know. I can do a little bit more research next time, find something that'll last maybe even an hour or so, and I can tell more folklore while I stream. If you're okay with being told folklore in the same vein of someone who hasn't read the story in a while, but is like, oh yeah, so Meleager says, hey dude, I'll kill this boar for you. If that is the vibe that you're going for, sweet. Alright, I will see y'all later, and have a good day, and do not make instruments out of bones, please. Bye.